Everything crumbled in an instant: his career, his reputation, his entire identity as Adam Walker, heir to a financial empire. The numbers didn't lie. Adam stared blankly at the cascading red figures on his screen, each digit a hammer pounding away at his already fragile sense of self. The project had failed, spectacularly. Hundreds of millions gone, and all under his careless watch. He could already hear the whispers: negligent, spoiled, incompetent. Words that had followed him since childhood, murmured in boardrooms and at family dinners, but never screamed as loud as they were now. For a brief moment, he considered walking away. He could disappear, leave the country, escape the shame that was about to crush him. But there was nowhere to go. This wasn't just any failure, it was a public disgrace. And there was no escaping his mother. Evelyn Walker had built their empire with the kind of cold precision that scared even the most seasoned executives. Now, she stood across the room, silent, calculating, her eyes locked on him as if measuring how much of her son's failures would tarnish her name. There was no warmth in her gaze, no sign of maternal concern. Only the icy resolve of a woman who could and would tear down anyone who threatened her legacy. Even her own blood. Adam. Her voice sliced through the silence like a knife. Sharp, unforgiving. Do you even understand what you've done? His throat tightened. Of course, he understood. He'd single-handedly obliterated the trust of their investors, jeopardized their standing in the market, and cost the company millions. The weight of it crushed his chest, and yet he still couldn't find the words to defend himself. I thought the projections were. Evelyn's cold laughter cut him off. You thought? You didn't think. That's the problem. You haven't thought about anything beyond yourself for years. The words hit harder than he expected. She wasn't just attacking his competence, she was ripping apart every piece of his identity. Adam, the golden boy, the charming heir who could coast through life on his last name alone, was now nothing but a liability. She took a step closer, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to his doom. This isn't just about the money. You've embarrassed the Walker name. Our name. Adam swallowed hard, panic rising in his chest. He wanted to fight back, to say something, anything, to prove that he wasn't a complete failure. But the truth was undeniable. He'd messed up, and there was no fixing it. Do you know what happens now? Evelyn's voice was so calm, it sent a shiver down his spine. This wasn't just a reprimand. It was a sentence. Before he could answer, she continued. You'll marry Rachel Adams. The words hung in the air, confusing him. Rachel Adams? He blinked, trying to place her name. She worked in the company, didn't she? A secretary? No, an assistant. Adam had barely noticed her before. Just another quiet face in the sea of employees who handled the grunt work so he didn't have to. What? He stammered, his mind racing to catch up. What does Rachel have to do with this? Evelyn didn't flinch. Her tone remained unyielding. You need to clean up this mess. Marrying Rachel will help control the narrative. She's loyal, hardworking, and discreet. You, on the other hand, she paused, her gaze hardening, need someone to manage you. The humiliation was overwhelming. Marriage? To a woman he barely knew? It was absurd. But this wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. Adam felt the walls closing in around him. Everything about his life had been a performance, a show put on to maintain appearances. And now, his own mother was pulling the strings of this new act, as though he were nothing more than a puppet in her carefully orchestrated game. I won't do it, Adam muttered, his jaw clenched. He wasn't about to let her dictate his life like this. You don't have a choice. Her response was immediate, final. You've lost that privilege. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe. Rachel Adams sat at her desk on the 15th floor of Walker Enterprises, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she tried to ignore the knot in her stomach. She knew. The rumors had already started swirling about the collapse of Adam Walker's project, and though she wasn't directly involved, the fallout would ripple through the entire company. She just hadn't expected to be dragged into the eye of the storm. When the call came to meet with Evelyn Walker, Rachel had assumed it was about her current work assignment. The last thing she anticipated was to be handed a marriage proposal. No, not a proposal. A demand. The conversation played over and over in her mind, like a nightmare on repeat. Evelyn hadn't even blinked when she'd said it, like marrying her son was just another transaction to finalize. "Rachel, I trust you understand the position you're in," Evelyn had said, her tone as neutral as if she were discussing quarterly earnings. "Your mother's medical bills. They're overwhelming you, aren't they?" Rachel had frozen. How did Evelyn know about her mother's health? She had worked so hard to keep her personal life separate from her job, but Evelyn Walker clearly had ways of getting information. "I'm willing to ensure that those bills are taken care of," Evelyn continued smoothly, "if you agree to marry Adam." Rachel had wanted to laugh. Or scream. But the offer wasn't a joke. It was a lifeline. One she desperately needed. Her mother's surgeries, the debt piling up, it was suffocating. Without help, she didn't know how she would make it through another month. But marriage? To Adam Walker, the entitled, arrogant playboy who couldn't be bothered to remember the names of half the people he worked with? The thought alone made her skin crawl. Yet, what choice did she have? Adam couldn't believe it. Less than 24 hours ago, his biggest problem had been a financial disaster. Now, he was being shackled to a woman he hardly knew, for the sake of repairing his public image. As he paced his lavish apartment, every corner seemed to mock him. The life he had taken for granted was now crumbling at his feet. His phone buzzed. A message from his mother: "The arrangements have been made. You'll meet with Rachel tomorrow." Tomorrow. His future would change completely by tomorrow. And for the first time in his life, Adam Walker, the man who had never known real consequences, felt utterly powerless. Adam Walker had never felt more out of place in his own office. The glass walls and marble floors, once symbols of his power and privilege, now seemed to close in around him, amplifying his failures. Every time he caught someone's gaze, an assistant, a manager, even the janitor, he could feel their silent judgment. They all knew. The whispers about his project's failure had spread like wildfire. The headlines had barely cooled, and yet, the story was far from over. And now, as if the weight of his crumbling career wasn't enough, he was being forced into a marriage. A marriage. The word itself felt foreign on his tongue. Rachel Adams was a name he barely recognized before yesterday, and now she was supposed to be his salvation. He scoffed at the absurdity of it all as he stood in his office, looking out over the city skyline. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. The message was simple: cold, board meeting at 3. Don't be late. The board. His stomach twisted. His failure was about to be laid bare in front of them, every member eager to see how far the golden boy had fallen. Adam could already picture the smug faces, the quiet satisfaction in watching him squirm. They'd been waiting for this. For years, they'd put up with his arrogance, his laissez-faire attitude toward the company, only because he was Evelyn Walker's son. Now, they'd have their chance to take him down a notch. But first, he had to meet Rachel. The woman who was about to become his wife. If you like the story, don't forget to subscribe. Rachel stood in front of the towering glass doors of Walker Enterprises, her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't how she had imagined her life would go. She'd spent years working tirelessly, trying to build a career, hoping one day to move up the ranks. And now, all that work meant nothing. Her future was tied to Adam Walker, the man who would become the face of failure overnight. She tried to shake off the nerves as she stepped inside, but the cold, sterile environment of the building only amplified her anxiety. Everything here was too polished, too perfect, just like Adam's life had been before it all fell apart. Rachel wasn't sure what she expected from this meeting, but she knew it wouldn't be pleasant. How could it be? She was being forced into a marriage, just like him. The difference was, Adam had a choice. He could walk away from all of this, from the company, from the marriage, from the scandal. But she couldn't. She had nowhere to go. Her mother's mounting medical bills, the debt she'd accumulated, the pressure, it all weighed on her shoulders like a suffocating burden. And now, Adam Walker was her only way out. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, Rachel's breath caught in her throat. There he was, leaning against the edge of his desk, his back to her as he stared out the window. For a moment, she hesitated, wondering if she should turn around and leave. But then the memory of her mother's hospital room flashed in her mind, and she steeled herself. She couldn't afford to back out now. Clearing her throat, she stepped forward. Adam? He turned, and for a split second, she saw the vulnerability in his eyes, just a flicker before his usual cocky mask slipped back into place. His gaze swept over her, cold, assessing. Rachel, he said, his voice flat. Let's get this over with. Rachel swallowed hard. Right. There was no warmth between them, no pretense of civility. This wasn't a normal meeting. It was a negotiation, a transaction. And both of them knew it. Adam gestured to the chair in front of his desk. Have a seat. She did as she was told, folding her hands in her lap to stop them from trembling. Adam remained standing, pacing behind his desk as if he couldn't quite settle himself. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension. I'm sure you know why you're here, Adam finally said, his voice tight with frustration. This is not ideal for either of us. But we don't have a choice. Rachel bit her lip, choosing her words carefully. No, we don't. He stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing as he looked at her. Do you even want this? It was an honest question, one that cut through the formalities and the pretense. Rachel met his gaze, her heart racing. Do you? Adam scoffed, running a hand through his hair. Of course not. This whole thing is insane. She nodded, feeling a strange sense of solidarity in their mutual frustration. Then why are you going along with it? He paused, his jaw clenching. Because if I don't, I lose everything. My position, my reputation, my family's company, everything. Rachel exhaled slowly. That makes two of us. For the first time, a flicker of understanding passed between them. They were both trapped in this, both trying to survive in the aftermath of Adam's colossal failure. It didn't make things any easier, but it was a start. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe. The board meeting was a disaster from the moment Adam walked in. The room was packed with the company's top brass, all sitting around the sleek, polished table like vultures circling a dying animal. Evelyn Walker sat at the head, her expression as unreadable as ever. Adam's stomach churned as he took his seat near the middle, already feeling their eyes on him, dissecting every move. The head of the finance committee, Charles Whitmore, cleared his throat. Walker, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Care to explain what went wrong? Adam had prepared for this. He had rehearsed the numbers, memorized the talking points, crafted an airtight defense. But as soon as he opened his mouth, the words died on his tongue. The room was suffocating, every pair of eyes a reminder of his failure. He could feel the sweat forming at the back of his neck, and his mind scrambled for something, anything, that would salvage this. It was an unexpected downturn, Adam managed, his voice weak. Market fluctuations. Market fluctuations? Whitmore interrupted, his voice rising in incredulous anger. Do you think we're all idiots? This wasn't about the market. It was about your incompetence. The words hit Adam like a physical blow. He could feel the room closing in, the judgment, the barely concealed contempt from the men and women around the table. They had never respected him. Not really. He was Evelyn Walker's son, a placeholder in a position he hadn't earned. And now, they had their chance to cut him down. Adam started, but his voice cracked, betraying the panic he was trying so hard to suppress. His mother's gaze was on him, cold, detached, as if watching a stranger. There would be no rescue from her today. Whitmore stood, his eyes blazing with the opportunity to finish Adam off. This failure has cost us millions, Walker. Millions. And now we're expected to sit here and listen to your pathetic excuses? Adam's hands clenched into fists under the table. He wanted to fight back, to scream at them that it wasn't all his fault, that he wasn't the only one to blame. But he couldn't. Because deep down, he knew they were right. He had been careless. He had relied too much on his name, on the safety net of his family's legacy. And now, there was nothing left to protect him. Evelyn's voice cut through the tension like a razor. Enough. The room fell silent. Whitmore's mouth snapped shut, but the fire in his eyes remained. Adam held his breath, waiting for his mother's verdict. Evelyn stood slowly, her eyes scanning the room with the cool precision of a predator assessing its prey. "This company has survived worse than this," she said, her voice calm, almost indifferent. "Adam has made mistakes, yes. But this isn't the end." Adam blinked, confused by the shift in tone. Was she defending him? But make no mistake, Evelyn continued, her gaze flicking to Adam, this will be his last chance. He will clean up this mess. He will restore what he's lost. Or he will no longer be a part of this company. The finality in her words was like a knife to his gut. There was no room for error, no room for redemption beyond this. If he failed again, it would be over. Rachel hadn't expected Adam to call her that evening, but when her phone rang, she knew immediately who it was. The strained silence on the other end of the line told her everything she needed to know. "They want blood," Adam said, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel sat down, her own heart heavy with the weight of their shared burden. "What happened?" "They tore me apart. The board. They don't believe I can fix this. Hell, I don't even know if I can fix this." For a moment, Rachel didn't know what to say. The man on the other end of the line sounded nothing like the arrogant, untouchable Adam Walker she had seen in the office. This was a man who had been broken, stripped of his confidence and pride. "You're not in this alone," she said softly, surprising even herself with the conviction in her voice. Adam let out a bitter laugh. "Aren't I?" "No," she insisted. "You're not." There was a long pause, and Rachel could almost hear the gears turning in Adam's mind. Finally, he spoke again, his voice softer, less defensive. "Tomorrow. We need to start tomorrow." She knew what he meant. The marriage. The partnership. The fight to claw their way out of this mess. Tomorrow, she agreed, even though her stomach churned at the thought of what lay ahead. The morning sun was barely breaking over the horizon when Adam Walker found himself sitting in his office, staring blankly at the untouched coffee on his desk. The events of the previous day, the board's ruthless dissection of his failure, his mother's cold ultimatum, and Rachel's unexpected support played on an endless loop in his mind. There was no room for error anymore. His life, his future, his family's legacy, everything depended on the success of the next few months. And if he couldn't pull it off, he'd lose everything. Not just his career, but the very sense of who he was. For the first time in his life, Adam Walker couldn't rely on his name or his privilege to save him. The door to his office creaked open, and Rachel stepped in. Her face was unreadable, a mask of quiet determination. She'd arrived earlier than expected, as if the weight of their new partnership had kept her from sleep just as it had for Adam. "Morning," she said softly, setting her bag on a chair. she looked every bit as tired as he felt. "Morning," Adam replied, rubbing his temples. "I've been going over the numbers all night. It's worse than I thought." Rachel approached his desk, glancing at the spreadsheets he'd spread out. The financial damage was staggering: hundreds of millions lost, shareholders furious, and potential lawsuits looming. It wasn't just a mess, it was a disaster. Yet, despite the sinking feeling in his gut, Adam sensed something else. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could turn this around together. "I know," Rachel said, her voice calm. "But we still have options. The Walker name has more pull than you think, and there are investors who might be willing to give us a second chance if we play it right." Adam nodded, but there was doubt in his eyes. His confidence had taken too many hits, and the weight of expectation was heavy on his shoulders. He couldn't afford to fail again. As they discussed potential strategies, meetings with key investors, cutting unnecessary expenses, and overhauling internal processes, Adam couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The tension in the room was palpable, and it wasn't just because of their looming marriage. There was an air of something unspoken between them, a quiet wariness that neither of them addressed. Adam couldn't tell if it was the result of their forced situation or the inevitable mistrust that came with desperation. "We need to be careful," Rachel said, snapping him back to the present. "If we move too fast, it'll look like we're panicking. The investors need to feel like we're in control." Adam gave a weak smile. "Control. Right. That's exactly what I'm known for." Rachel tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Don't underestimate yourself. You may have messed up, but you still have the name and the connections. And you have me." The words hung in the air, heavier than Adam expected. There was a strange comfort in knowing that Rachel, despite her own struggles, was committed to this twisted partnership. For better or worse, they were tied together now, and neither of them could back out. But just as Adam started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make it through this, his phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced down at the screen and felt the blood drain from his face. "We need to talk. Urgent." It was from Jason Mitchell, his closest friend and business associate. Jason was the one person Adam had trusted throughout his career. They'd gone through university together, climbed the corporate ladder side by side, and Jason had been by Adam's side throughout the entire debacle with the failed project. If anyone could help Adam fix this mess, it was Jason. But something about the message felt wrong. Jason had never been one for vague urgency. Normally, he was calm and collected, even in the worst of situations. "What is it?" Rachel asked, noticing the shift in Adam's expression. "It's Jason," Adam said, his voice tight. "He wants to meet. Urgently." Rachel's brow furrowed. "Do you trust him?" Adam hesitated. It was a simple question, but for some reason, the answer wasn't as straightforward as it should have been. He had trusted Jason for years. But something about the timing, the secrecy of the message, it set off alarm bells in Adam's mind. I don't know," he admitted, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "If you like the story, don't forget to subscribe." The meeting with Jason took place at a private club in the heart of the city, a spot they had frequented many times before. The walls were lined with dark mahogany, the air thick with the scent of cigars and old money. It was the kind of place where deals were made in whispers, and secrets were traded over glasses of whiskey. When Adam arrived, Jason was already seated at a corner table, his expression unreadable. His usual confident smirk was gone, replaced by something far more serious. "Adam," Jason said, gesturing for him to sit. "We need to talk." Adam sat down, his mind racing. The air between them felt different, charged with an unspoken tension. "What's going on, Jason?" Adam asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "What's so urgent?" Jason leaned forward, his hands clasped together on the table. For a moment, he said nothing, as if weighing his next words carefully. I'm going to be straight with you, Jason said finally. The board. They're planning to push you out. Adam's heart skipped a beat. What? I've been hearing whispers for weeks, Jason continued. Ever since the project failed, they've been looking for a way to cut ties with you. They think you're too much of a liability. They're scared the investors will lose faith in the company if you stay. Adam's mind reeled. But my mother said. Your mother isn't going to protect you this time, Adam, Jason interrupted, his tone harsh. She's distancing herself from the fallout. She has to. If the company collapses, she'll survive, but you? You're the one they'll blame. You're the face of this disaster. The words hit Adam like a punch to the gut. He had expected some resistance, some blowback from the board, but not this. Not a full-blown mutiny. How do you know this? Adam asked, his voice low, suspicious. Jason hesitated, his eyes darting away for a split second before meeting Adam's again. I've heard things. People talk. Adam narrowed his eyes. What kind of things, Jason? Jason sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, Adam, I didn't want to tell you this, but there's more. The failed project? The bad investment? It wasn't just bad luck. Someone inside the company sabotaged it. Adam blinked, his mind struggling to process what he was hearing. Sabotaged? What are you talking about? Jason leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. There were decisions made, investments shifted at the last minute, suppliers cut off, contractors pulled from the project. It was designed to fail. And whoever did it knew exactly how to make it look like your fault. The revelation left Adam speechless. For weeks, he had blamed himself for the project's collapse, for the loss of millions, for the humiliation. But now, it seemed like someone had been working behind the scenes, orchestrating his downfall. Who? Adam asked, his voice shaking with anger. Who did this? Jason hesitated again, his eyes flicking away. I don't know. Adam slammed his fist on the table, causing the glasses to rattle. Don't lie to me, Jason. You know something. Jason flinched, but he held his ground. I swear, I don't know who's behind it. But you need to be careful. Whoever it is, they're playing a long game. They want you out, Adam. And they're not going to stop until you're finished. Adam sat back in his chair, his mind racing. Sabotage. Betrayal. The board plotting against him. It was too much to take in. He felt like he was drowning in a sea of lies and deceit, with no way to claw his way back to the surface. But one thing was clear, he couldn't trust anyone. Not even Jason. Back at the office, Adam paced the floor, his thoughts spiraling. Rachel sat across from him, watching him carefully, her arms crossed. She had listened to his account of the meeting with Jason without interrupting, her face a mask of quiet contemplation. So someone inside the company sabotaged the project, she said finally, her voice calm, measured. And now the board wants to push you out. Adam nodded, his jaw clenched. That's what Jason says. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Do you believe him? I don't know, Adam admitted. I've known Jason for years, but something doesn't feel right. He's hiding something. Rachel was silent for a moment, her gaze locked on Adam's. And what about your mother? Could she be involved? Adam froze, the question catching him off guard. His mother? Involved in sabotaging him? The idea seemed absurd. And yet, something about it gnawed at him. Evelyn Walker was a ruthless woman, a master manipulator. She had built the Walker empire on her own terms, using any means necessary. If she thought Adam was too much of a liability. No, Adam said, shaking his head. She wouldn't do that. She's cold, but she wouldn't sabotage her own son. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Wouldn't she? She's already thrown you to the wolves. She told you herself this is your last chance. If you fail again, she's cutting you loose. Adam clenched his fists, the anger and frustration bubbling up inside him. I can't believe she would go that far. Rachel leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. You need to start thinking like they do, Adam. This isn't just business, it's survival. If someone inside the company is willing to sabotage you, if the board is already planning to replace you, then you can't trust anyone. Not Jason. Not even your mother. The words cut deep, but Adam knew she was right. He had been blind for too long, relying on his name and his privilege to protect him. But now, he was alone, surrounded by enemies on all sides. I need to find out who's behind this, Adam said, his voice hardening with determination. And I need to stop them before they take everything from me. Rachel nodded. We'll figure it out. Together. Adam glanced at her, surprised by the intensity in her voice. There was no hesitation, no doubt in her eyes. She was with him, completely. And for the first time in weeks, Adam felt a glimmer of hope. But that hope was short-lived. Just as they were beginning to plan their next steps, Adam's phone buzzed with another message. This one sent a chill down his spine. Check the news. You've been sold out. Adam's heart pounded as he opened the link in the message. His eyes scanned the headline, and the blood drained from his face. Insider sources reveal Adam Walker's role in Walker Enterprises' collapse, company's heir accused of gross mismanagement. Someone had leaked everything. The failed project, the financial disaster, the board's plans to push him out, it was all there, plastered across the news for the world to see. His name, his reputation, everything he had left, it was all being torn apart in front of him. Rachel's eyes widened as she read over his shoulder. Adam. He didn't respond. His world was collapsing, and he had no idea who to trust. But one thing was certain, this was no longer just about saving his position at the company. This was war. Adam Walker stared at the headline again, unable to process what was happening. His face, his name, his disgrace all splashed across every major financial news outlet. It felt like a nightmare unfolding in slow motion, each new revelation tightening the noose around his neck. The company, his position, his family's legacy, it was all slipping through his fingers. How? Adam whispered, his voice hollow. How did this happen? Rachel was by his side, her eyes scanning the screen, equally stunned. Someone leaked the information, she murmured. This was calculated, Adam. It's too specific, too perfectly timed. The weight of her words sank in. This wasn't just a smear campaign, it was a carefully orchestrated attack. Someone wanted him out, wanted him destroyed, and they were doing everything in their power to make it happen. Adam's phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from an unknown number. You're finished, Walker. Time to step aside. A wave of cold fury surged through him. He had spent the past few weeks second-guessing every decision, every relationship. The board was conspiring against him. His closest ally, Jason, was hiding something. His lone mother had practically disowned him. And now this. He slammed his phone down on the desk, his hands trembling with rage. They're not going to get away with this, he muttered, more to himself than to Rachel. Rachel placed a hand on his shoulder, a steadying force amid the chaos. Adam, we have to be smart about this. Whoever's behind this leak, they're already 2 steps ahead. If we act impulsively, we'll just play into their hands. Adam turned to look at her, his emotions raw. What am I supposed to do then? Just sit back and let them destroy me? My career, my reputation. My life? No, Rachel said firmly. We fight back. But we do it strategically. Her words were logical, but Adam's emotions were spiraling. He had never felt so powerless, so exposed. The company was on the brink of collapse, and everyone was looking at him like he was the cause of it all. He couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what he did, the walls were closing in on him. "I don't know how much more of this I can take," Adam admitted quietly, his voice cracking. It was the first time he had voiced the fear that had been gnawing at him for days. For years, he had been untouchable, living in the shadow of his family's power and wealth. Now, that protection was gone, and he was just a man, alone, vulnerable. Rachel's eyes softened, and for a moment, all the tension between them faded. "Adam, you're not alone in this. You still have me." Those words, simple as they were, hit Adam like a punch to the gut. For so long, he had seen Rachel as part of the solution, a necessary pawn in the game his mother had forced them to play. But now, she was something more. The only person who hadn't abandoned him, the only one who seemed to believe in him when even he wasn't sure he believed in himself. Before Adam could respond, there was a knock at the door. The tension in the room shifted immediately. Rachel pulled her hand back, and Adam straightened, clearing his throat. "Come in," he said, his voice steely again. The door opened, and Charles Whitmore, the head of the finance committee and one of Adam's harshest critics, walked in. His expression was as smug as ever. "Walker," Whitmore said, not even bothering to acknowledge Rachel's presence. "We need to talk." Adam clenched his fists under the desk. He didn't have the patience for Whitmore's usual condescending tone. "What do you want, Charles?" Whitmore smirked, walking over to the window and peering out at the city below. "I'm sure you've seen the news by now," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "This leak. It's unfortunate. Very unfortunate. But I think it's time we face the reality of the situation." Adam's jaw tightened. "And what reality is that?" Whitmore turned, his eyes gleaming with barely concealed satisfaction. "You're finished, Walker. The board's lost confidence in you. This scandal is just the final nail in the coffin. We're calling for a vote of no confidence at the next meeting." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Adam felt the ground shift beneath him. A vote of no confidence meant only one thing: the board wanted him gone, and they had the power to make it happen. "You've wanted this all along, haven't you?" Adam said, his voice low and dangerous. "You've been waiting for me to fail so you could take over." Whitmore didn't even bother to deny it. "It's nothing personal, Walker. But the company needs stability, and right now, you're anything but stable." Adam stood up, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think you can just take everything from me? The company, my future, you think I'm going to let you do that?" Whitmore's smile widened. "I think you don't have a choice. This is business, Adam. If you can't handle the pressure, maybe it's time you stepped aside." The anger bubbling inside Adam threatened to explode. Every fiber of his being screamed to lash out, to make Whitmore pay for the smug arrogance etched across his face. But Rachel's voice echoed in his mind. "Be strategic. Don't act impulsively." He forced himself to take a deep breath, his gaze never leaving Whitmore's. "You can try to push me out," Adam said, his voice cold and steady. "But I'm not going down without a fight." Whitmore raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by Adam's defiance. "Good luck with that," he said. "You're going to need it." With that, he turned and walked out of the office, leaving Adam and Rachel in a heavy silence. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe. Rachel waited until Whitmore was gone before speaking. "He's bluffing." Adam turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" "He's pushing you, trying to provoke you into making a mistake," Rachel explained. "If you explode, if you react the way he expects, you'll prove to the board that you're too unstable to lead. You need to stay calm." Adam let out a bitter laugh. "Stay calm? He's trying to destroy everything I've built." Rachel stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. I know. But if you play into his hands, he wins. You need to be smarter than him. Adam looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. She was right, of course. But the rage still simmered beneath the surface. He had been pushed, manipulated, and betrayed for weeks now. His patience was wearing thin. I don't know how to win this, he admitted, his voice strained. Rachel placed a hand on his arm. We'll figure it out. But first, we need to find out who leaked the information. That's our only leverage. Adam nodded, trying to focus. Do you have any idea who it could be? Rachel hesitated, her eyes narrowing in thought. Jason, she said after a moment. He's been acting strangely ever since this whole thing started. He knew about the board's plans before anyone else. He's been close to you for years, but now something doesn't feel right. Adam's stomach dropped. Jason. His best friend, his closest confidant. Could it really be him? Could Jason be the one orchestrating his downfall? I'll talk to him, Adam said, his voice grim. I need to know the truth. The meeting with Jason took place later that evening, in the same private club where they had always met. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Tense. Charged. Adam felt the weight of suspicion pressing down on him, but he forced himself to remain calm. Jason arrived late, his usual confident swagger noticeably absent. He slid into the seat across from Adam, his face carefully blank. What's going on, Adam? Jason asked, his voice casual, but there was an edge to it, a wariness that hadn't been there before. I think you know exactly what's going on, Adam said, his voice cold. Jason frowned, leaning back in his chair. What's that supposed to mean? It means that someone leaked the information about the failed project. Someone who had access to all the details. Someone close to me. Jason's expression didn't change, but Adam saw the slight flicker in his eyes. You think it was me? Jason asked, incredulous. You think I'd betray you like that? Adam leaned forward, his voice dangerously low. Did you? Jason's eyes hardened, and for a moment, Adam saw a flash of something: guilt, anger, fear? He couldn't be sure. I've been your friend for years, Adam. I've had your back through everything. And now you're accusing me of stabbing you in the back? I'm not accusing, Adam said, his voice steady. I'm asking. Because if it wasn't you, I need to know who it was. Jason didn't respond immediately. The silence between them was thick, suffocating. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet. It wasn't me, Adam. But you're in over your head. The board wants you out. Your mother. She's not going to save you this time. You need to accept that. Adam's blood ran cold. What do you mean? Jason sighed, rubbing his hands over his face. I've heard things, Adam. From the board, from people close to your mother. She's positioning herself to take over once you're gone. She's already making moves to distance herself from you. Adam felt like he'd been punched in the gut. His own mother? Positioning herself to take over? It couldn't be true. Could it? She wouldn't do that, Adam said, but the words felt hollow, even to his own ears. Jason's expression softened, and for the first time, there was genuine sympathy in his eyes. I'm sorry, Adam. But she's doing what she thinks is best for the company. And if that means cutting you loose, she'll do it. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Adam had faced before. His mother, the woman who had raised him, who had groomed him to take over the company, was now ready to throw him to the wolves. For a moment, Adam didn't know what to do, what to think. The walls were closing in on him from every direction. He had no one left to trust. Back at the office, Rachel was waiting for him. The moment Adam walked in, she knew something was wrong. She could see it in the way his shoulders sagged, the defeated look in his eyes. "What happened?" she asked, her voice soft. Adam sat down heavily in the chair across from her, running a hand through his hair. "It's worse than we thought," he said, his voice hollow. "Jason. He's not behind the leak. But the board is coming for me. And my mother." Rachel's heart sank. "What about her?" Adam's voice broke. "She's positioning herself to take over once I'm gone. She's already distancing herself from me. I think she's ready to let me fall." Rachel sat down next to him, her heart breaking for him. She had seen Adam at his worst, but this was different. This was the moment he realized that everything he had believed in, everything he had relied on, was crumbling around him. "I don't know what to do," Adam admitted, his voice shaking. "I don't know how to fight this." Rachel reached out, taking his hand in hers. "We'll figure it out," she said quietly. "You're not alone in this." Adam looked at her, and for the first time, he allowed himself to truly feel the weight of everything. The betrayal, the fear, the vulnerability. He had spent so long trying to be strong, trying to be the perfect son, the perfect leader. But now, he was just lost. And in that moment, something shifted between them. The walls that had been keeping them apart began to crumble, and Adam realized that Rachel wasn't just his partner in this fight, she was his lifeline. Without thinking, without hesitation, Adam leaned in and kissed her. The kiss was unexpected, but it was exactly what both of them needed. A release, a moment of connection in the midst of all the chaos. For so long, they had been forced together by circumstance, by necessity. But now, in this moment, it was real. The walls of the office, the pressure of the company, the looming threats, they all faded away, leaving just the two of them, bound by something deeper than they had ever acknowledged. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, Adam looked at Rachel with a new understanding. "I don't want to lose you," he whispered. Rachel smiled softly, her eyes bright with emotion. "You won't." But the world outside their bubble wasn't so forgiving. The next day, the pressure mounted to unbearable heights. The board was moving forward with the vote of no confidence. The media was tearing Adam apart, and the investors were growing increasingly anxious. It all came to a head at the next board meeting, where Adam was forced to stand before the very people who were plotting his downfall. Whitmore, his smug face plastered with fake concern, was the one to lead the charge. "We're here to discuss the future of Walker Enterprises," Whitmore began, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "And whether or not Adam Walker is fit to continue leading this company." Adam stood tall, his heart pounding in his chest, but his mind clear. He had spent the past few days preparing for this moment, knowing it would be his last chance to save everything. And with Rachel by his side, he felt a strength he hadn't known he possessed. As the board members began to speak, listing their grievances, their doubts, their reasons for wanting him gone, Adam listened carefully. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, he felt ready. Ready to fight. Ready to take control of his destiny. When it was finally his turn to speak, the room fell silent. "I'd made mistakes," Adam began, his voice strong and steady. "I won't deny that. But what you're asking me to do, what you're planning, is to step aside, to let someone else come in and take over. And that's not going to happen." Whitmore raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "And why should we believe you can turn things around?" "Because I'm not the man I was a few weeks ago," Adam said, meeting Whitmore's gaze head-on. "I've learned from my mistakes. I've faced the consequences. And now, I'm ready to lead this company into the future." The room was quiet, the tension thick. Whitmore opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, Adam continued. "But there's something you all need to know. Something I've uncovered in the past few days." Adam's voice dropped to a dangerous tone. "There's been sabotage within this company. Someone on this board has been working against me, against the company. And I have the proof. A ripple of shock passed through the room. Whitmore's smug expression faltered. Adam pulled out a folder and set it on the table. Here are the records. Financial transactions, emails, everything. The person behind this has been manipulating the company's investments, orchestrating my downfall, and they've been doing it right under your noses. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Whitmore shifted in his seat. And that person, Adam said, his eyes locking onto Whitmore, is Charles Whitmore. The room erupted into chaos. Whitmore's face turned white as he sputtered in denial, but the evidence was undeniable. Adam had spent the past few days gathering everything he needed, with Rachel's help, to expose Whitmore's betrayal. It was the turning point Adam needed. By the end of the meeting, Whitmore had been escorted out, his position stripped, and Adam had secured his place as CEO. It wasn't an easy victory, and the road ahead was still fraught with challenges. But for the first time in weeks, Adam felt like he could breathe again. Outside the boardroom, Rachel was waiting for him. The moment she saw him, she smiled. "You did it," she said softly. Adam smiled back, his heart full. "We did it." They stood there, together, in the aftermath of the battle they had fought. And though there were still many obstacles ahead, Adam knew one thing for certain: he wasn't facing them alone. The boardroom had emptied out, the echoes of heated arguments and desperate pleas fading into silence. Adam Walker stood alone in the now quiet space, the weight of the day's events settling heavily on his shoulders. He had won. Whitmore was gone, the board had sided with him, and for the first time in weeks, the storm seemed to be passing. Yet, Adam didn't feel the triumphant rush he had expected. There was relief, yes, but also a strange sense of melancholy. The victory had cost him more than he anticipated. He walked over to the window, staring out at the city below. It looked the same as it always had, bustling, alive with energy, but something inside him had shifted. The man who had entered this boardroom a few weeks ago had been a shadow of what he was now. He had been entitled, arrogant, relying on his family name to shield him from the consequences of his actions. Now, he was someone else. He had faced betrayal, humiliation, and the possibility of losing everything, and yet he had come through the other side wiser, humbler, and finally in control of his own fate. Behind him, the door opened softly, and Adam didn't need to turn around to know it was Rachel. Her presence was steadying, grounding, the one constant in a world that had been falling apart around him. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft, concerned. Adam sighed, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. "I should feel better, shouldn't I?" He turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. "We won. But I don't know. It feels like something's still missing." Rachel stepped closer, her expression thoughtful. "It's because this wasn't just about winning, Adam. It's about what comes after. You've been fighting so hard to hold on to the company, to prove yourself, but now you need to decide what you really want." Her words struck him deeply. For so long, he had been reacting, fighting to survive, to protect his legacy, to live up to the impossible standards his mother had set for him. But now, with the immediate threat gone, he realized he didn't want to just survive anymore. He wanted to live. He wanted to build something for himself, not just carry the weight of his family's name. "I've spent my whole life trying to be the man my mother wanted me to be," Adam said quietly, the realization finally sinking in. "But I don't think I want that anymore. I don't need to be the next Evelyn Walker. I need to be me." Rachel smiled softly, a look of understanding passing between them. "Then be you, Adam. You've already proven you can lead. Now, lead on your terms." Adam nodded, feeling a sense of clarity wash over him. The fight for control wasn't over, it never would be in the cutthroat world of business, but for the first time in his life, he was ready to define what success meant to him, instead of living in someone else's shadow. Later that day, Adam went to see his mother. The confrontation had been inevitable, and though he had been dreading it, he knew it was necessary. Evelyn Walker sat in her office, as cold and composed as ever. The moment Adam walked in, she regarded him with the same calculating gaze that had unnerved him as a child. "I heard about Whitmore," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Well done." Adam didn't sit. He stood across from her, meeting her gaze with the newfound strength he had earned. "You set me up to fail." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, but there was no denial in her expression. "I gave you the opportunity to prove yourself. Whether you succeeded or failed was entirely up to you." "You were ready to let me fall," Adam continued, his voice steady but not accusing. "You were ready to take over if I couldn't handle it." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, folding her hands in her lap. "I did what was necessary for the company, Adam. Walker Enterprises will always come first." Adam nodded slowly. "And that's where we're different. I used to think like you, that the company, the power, the legacy, was all that mattered. But I don't want to live like that anymore." Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm not going to be you, Mom," Adam said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm going to run this company differently. I'm going to lead, but not with fear, not with manipulation. I'm going to build something that's mine, not just something that keeps your legacy alive." For the first time, Adam saw something flicker in his mother's eyes, something like surprise, or maybe even respect. She didn't speak for a long moment, and when she finally did, her voice was softer, almost contemplative. "We'll see how long that lasts," she said, but there was no malice in her tone, only acknowledgement. Adam gave a small nod and turned to leave. He didn't need her approval anymore. As he stepped out of his mother's office and into the sunlight, Adam felt lighter than he had in years. The burden of expectation, of living up to his family's name, had finally lifted. He was free to chart his own path now. And he knew exactly who he wanted by his side. That evening, Adam found Rachel waiting for him at the balcony of his apartment, the city lights flickering below. He walked up beside her, taking her hand in his. "I've been thinking," Adam said, his voice low. "About what comes next." Rachel turned to him, her eyes bright with curiosity. "And?" Adam smiled, feeling more at peace than he had in a long time. "I don't know exactly where we're going from here, but I know I want to do it with you." Rachel smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "Then let's do it together." And for the first time in his life, Adam wasn't afraid of what the future held. He wasn't trying to be someone he wasn't, and he wasn't running from the weight of his name. He had found something far more valuable, himself. And with Rachel by his side, he was ready to build a future on his own terms. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and become part of our community. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell us how you felt about Adam's journey. Was there a moment that spoke to you? Let's talk about it. And don't forget, there's more to come. Stick around and watch the next story waiting for you on screen. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story that keeps you on the edge of your seat. See you in the next one.